Mhm.
For episode 8 of season 3, Tom and I have decided to go with our most upbeat topic yet.
Andy, are you listening?
We are going with dead artists.
This is Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek.
So get the beer out,
Box of
popcorn,
tissues.
tissues, sure. We're trying to find the right balance between having an entertaining podcast and laughing at death. So I will start with a story that I've told before. Most of my stories, it's funny, I don't know why I talk about death all the time, but I seem to have because the couple stories that I wanted to start with, I know I've already discussed, but I'm going to go with it anyway. I think the one that I'll go with because we used the word serendipitous just the other day when we were talking. And that's how I found out about the death of Mark Sandman, who was the lead singer for Morphine. And it was just one of those things that I felt like it seemed like I was meant to find out because it was back long before the internet was so easy and you're getting, updates through Facebook and on Instagram and X or whatever the hell it's called these days. I was just reading the newspaper one weekend and thought I'd just finished. I wanted to go put it down and I picked one more section up, scanning through and said lead singer of band dies on stage or something like that. And I was like, huh. And I read through and it was Mark Sandman had died while performing in Italy in exorbitant heat. Apparently, it was an outdoor festival and he died from a heart attack right on stage. And I know I've been sharing with Tom how much I like them. We sort of have these parallel paths, like certain bands that only stay on my side or only stay on his side. And Morphine had largely stayed on my side. They were very different than stuff that I'd listened to previously. It was Mark Sandman and in either a one or two string bass guitar that he made. I think his name was Dana Colley. He was the saxophonist who sometimes played too. And I think they had a drummer who I should remember his name, but I don't. But just really cool, smooth, kind of weird music. And I loved his voice. He was in a band previously from Boston called Treat Her Right. I loved their stuff. It was just, he was one of my favorites. I loved the writing. They were going into somewhat of almost like a spoken poetry or sung poetry type of thing. It was getting a little out, not out there, I shouldn't say, but a little beyond my normal taste. But I just thought that for once I was on the cutting edge of being cool. Um, just for once.
Just that one time.
Uh, and then when I found out he died, in your own way, when you get into an artist, it's devastating. You don't know these people per se, but you get the sense that you do. And particularly when you feel like you found someone. And for some reason in my life, that seems to be important. I talked about that in the blog where I love finding new artists and then when they get big. And Morphine was becoming a little bit bigger. I'm not sure they were ready to blow up into a really big band yet. They didn't seem to want that. And then when they put out that last album, I think they just called it The Night. It was sort of half done. And they went ahead and released it anyway. And it was even some of that stuff was haunting because you can tell that he was still working on it. And you don't always get a glimpse, at least back then, you didn't get a glimpse of that half done or not fully completed album material. So that depressed me even more. I think his bandmates tried to go on for a little while and they've had some tributes to him. And so that's what this episode's about, stories like that that have hit us in one way or the other. Some of these people are really famous, some not. But Tom and I are going to try to tie this into personal experience and what it's meant to us and try to depress the hell out of our audience this week.
I you said something right at the beginning. You were talking about balancing something, and
Yeah.
all I could think was this episode we're gonna try to balance the sad with the merely profoundly melancholy. So we
I'm
like to find a nice even balance in this podcast.
I can't wait to write another blog about melancholy.
Dude, if you tell another story where the episode doesn't have anything to do with death, but the band you're talking about just got killed in a car wreck the day that of their birthday or the day they
Yeah,
got
that
their
was.
gold record or
What about you? What is one of the more impactful artist deaths that you can remember?
you know and making fun of you about revisiting things, but I know I've talked about seeing the band Material Issue play in St. Louis. It was when I was in law school. I don't remember the exact year, but it I think it was 92, might have been 93. This band was out of Chicago, big local band, big regional band, seemed like they were on the verge of really breaking it. And I saw them in this tiny little basement bar and a restaurant off of Del Mar in St. Louis, very near where we lived. And it was a show I went for some reason. I went completely by myself and paid my $4 cover or whatever it was and sat. I was probably 7 feet from the band the whole time they were playing, and I think there were three tables in front of me. And they were awesome, and they're kind of a punk pop band, and I got a huge kick out of them. I think the reason I told the story the original time was because I bought an LP. I bought their album after the show, and I didn't own a turntable. I loved them so much, and it couldn't have been 3 years later. Their singer, songwriter, band leader, the motivating driving force behind the band Material Issue, killed himself. He died in 1996 by carbon monoxide poisoning in his garage. And I had, I was just kind of waiting for the next album. I think they'd come out with International Pop Overthrow after I saw them live. I thought, or at least I found it after I saw them live. And I was just waiting for the next one to come out. And I caught, similar to you, I caught a newspaper article or something in Riverfront Times or something like that, Rolling Stone maybe, just a little tiny blurb about the fact that this guy had committed suicide. And I'd only recently found them as a band, so I wasn't so invested in them. But it was really sad to think that I'm sure they had 10 more albums in them potentially. They seemed to be so creative and so much fun and so exciting to watch when they played. It was a departure for me, kind of like you're talking about. It wasn't the kind of music I necessarily always listened to, but I was really sad to hear that happened, and especially when you hear it's suicide, it's even that's
Yeah,
even more devastating. Especially when I was that age, and that guy couldn't have been 3 or 4 years older than me, any more than that.
right,
So that one always kind of struck me. I always think about that, the fact that I saw him not too long before he
right.
actually committed suicide.
And there are going to be a lot of other big names we're probably not going to talk about. Kurt
Yeah.
Cobain, you have Chris Cornell, and so forth and so on. And some really famous artists have either died tragically or tragically taken their own lives. But this is a little bit more about stuff that's personally hit us, just so we can make it all that more depressing for everyone. So, and I saw in your notes that Sammy, and I forget his last name, but one of the lead singers, because they were a duet of singers of the Bodines. I didn't know he passed away. So, what you have that one as one of your stories as well.
Sammy
Be
he was
honest,
one of the two leads of that band,
right?
Bodines. Kurt Newman is the other guy. And I think they were co-songwriters. I think they worked, it was kind of a Lennon and McCartney thing. I think they worked really close together. I feel like, at least it felt like they went way back and that they really complemented each other. Sammy had kind of a higher pitched, whinier voice, and Kurt, not that Kurt had a low pitched voice, but they really harmonized well, even though separately it didn't sound like they should. And Sammy was the reason I love that band, because he had the weird voice, the rough voice we talk about, the one that doesn't sound quite right. And that's why I loved that band. That's why I loved Love and Hope and Sex and Dreams, which I think was the first album I bought. And then I went back and bought their first one, and et cetera, et cetera. It's probably 10 years ago now that he passed away. And I don't know the circumstances. And in the spirit of this podcast, didn't actually go look it up. But I probably saw Bodine's 3 or 4 times with Sammy. And I've probably seen them at least twice since he passed away, because Kurt Newman continued with the band. They continue to tour, at least in the Midwest, where they've always been very popular. They were out of, I want to say, Racine, just south of Milwaukee. So they play in Chicago all the time. They play up in Milwaukee. They play all the festivals and that kind of thing. And they've played the Rialto Theater here in Joliet, which is a beautiful venue and a very cool place to see a band. And I've seen them play, as I said, at least twice without Sammy, and they're good and they're fun and it's very nostalgic to listen only because they play all the hits. You know, they're not afraid to play the stuff that everybody loves, but it is not the same. They've got another singer, another person who sings harmonies along with Kurt Newman, and he's fine. He's good, but that was such a unique voice that it's hard, and that's a band where I'll buy their new album, or these days, I guess I just add it from Apple Music, but I would always buy their new album, even after Sammy passed away, just out of loyalty to that band because they've given me so much joy over the years. But the new ones aren't as good as the original ones, and it has everything to do with his voice being missing.
Yeah, and I did not know that, and listened to just started getting back into them again. It's another one of those bands that got kind of popular there for a while, so I gave up on them. Um, I'll still check out some of their newer stuff because I've been making my way back through their catalog. You had some decent taste for you know,
Yeah, yeah,
for you,
and that's an interesting band because they were kind of they were Americana before there was Americana, in my opinion. I mean, they were definitely a rock and roll band, but they had those country influences, and you could hear them in the songs they wrote and the way they sang them, and that predated a lot of the No Depression bands.
right?
They'd already been touring and playing for years before bands like Uncle Tupelo started.
Yeah, and I also told this story, but I guess the most up close experience that I had with someone who had passed away was I went to go see Split Lip Rayfield play at a little club in Annapolis, and unfortunately, I went with a guy that was a lot bigger than me, and he sort of challenged me to a drinking contest over the course of the night informally. And this is back when they were just starting to bust out high alcohol beers, so I had no idea. He was sneaking in these like high alcohol little glasses. I'm like, it's just a little beer. So I'm drinking it. So by the end of the night, I'm pretty drunk. Great show. Kirk Rundstrom was one of the lead singers. They also had two guys that sang. He put out some solo stuff. Really enjoyed the show. Continued to get drunk. Went off to the bar part of this place. They had a underground bar, a regular bar with food, and then this listening room. And I wandered my way back, and Split Lip Rayfield is still clearing out the stage. And I went up and started talking to Kirk Rundstrom and probably made a fool out of myself. And he was patient and kind, got me out of the place without calling security. I found out a couple of weeks later that he had, probably a couple months later, I would say, I knew he was sick and he went off of chemo because he wasn't able to tour, and he started touring again, and he died not too long after that. And again, highly doubt that he remembered me, but I'm like, fuck, the only chance I get to talk to him, I'm a drunken idiot. But
Yeah.
they were a fantastic band. It was bluegrass and punk and some just really sharp, cutting edge types of songs. In fact, I picked one of those for one of my recommendations. So we'll get there in a little bit.
Yeah, they're so high energy. They're a Bloodshot Records band,
Yes.
and I don't know if they were out of Chicago, but I think they played like I don't think they originated necessarily in Chicago, but they played all over Chicago back in the late '90s and 2000. Well, no, when did he pass? Ah,
97
yes,
maybe.
so it must have been like mid '90s, right after I moved up here. I remember seeing them on
Well, they
posters.
continued to tour
Oh, okay,
without him.
maybe
They,
that's
they
what.
put out an album. I think several of the songs were dedicated to him. I just felt that they had lost a little bit of the edge because that was what was nice about. Well, I've never really taken to the high lonesome sound is too often you hear the same voice.
Right.
So what's great is when you get a band like Split Lip Rayfield, where you have one guy with one tone, and Kirk Rundstrom's was a little lower and a little more punky, and I really liked his songs. I did like the other guy's songs too, but I felt like they needed to, let's use this word again, they needed to balance each other out. So I haven't listened to them as much, but I think they're still a pretty good band.
Yeah, I can't say I've listened to them recently, but to me, they were definitely an interesting example of the whole no depression idea
Yeah.
of melding country music with punk because they really had somehow were able to sound like both of those things at the exact same time.
Yep.
I was going to bring up, and this one's kind of weird because I mean he was old. He was old when I saw him. But I don't know about you, but I have a list in my head of bands that I'd like to see or performers I'd like to see before they die. You know, the kind of the classic rock type people. And I've been pretty lucky. I've seen most of those at this point. In fact, I can't off the top of my head think of somebody that I would say, oh, if they passed right now, I wish I had seen them. But one of the guys I saw, I've seen him twice, and he died. Oh my gosh, at least 10 or 15 years ago now. But that's BB King.
Mhm.
Everybody knows who BB King is. Most people kind of probably disregard him as kind of just the old school blues guitarist. And that's what he was. I mean, he practically, he and a couple other guys kind of invented electric blues. And he was a phenomenal guitar player, and he had a cool blues voice, and he had this weird thing where, and you don't realize it when you're listening to an album or listening to his music streaming, but when you see him live, you realize he never plays and sings at the same time.
Hmm.
He plays, then he sings, he plays, then he sings. And it was kind of interesting to see. The first time I saw him was on campus at WashU in Graham Chapel. So in the church that was in the center of campus, this beautiful, uh, big, not big, but kind of stone. This church that looked like it was just picked up and moved from somewhere in Europe is a really gorgeous place. And they would occasionally have concerts there. And frankly, I don't know that there's anything cooler than seeing BB King play literally from the pulpit as we were all sitting in pews watching him. So I saw him, and he was, that was back in, I want to say probably in 86 or 7. And, so he was relatively young. He was in good health. He played. It was just an amazing show. And then about, maybe 20 years ago, I saw him play again. You can tell one of my favorite places to see a band at the Rialto Theater in Joliet. Amazing acoustics, great place to see somebody play. But he sat down the whole time. He would take, a song or two break sometimes and let the rest of his band play and sing stuff. He clearly was not in great health. I think at that point he had, amongst other things, diabetes, so I don't think he could walk very well. Um, but I got to see him again, and I don't think it was more than 2 years later that he did pass away. And that's one of the things I'm always proud to say is I got a chance to see BB King play before he died. And not only did I see him play, but I saw him play twice, and once was in a church, which, like I said, I think is kind of a badge of honor.
So I just jotted down, I know we don't like to do research ahead of time, but I was looking through various lists of famous and infamous deaths of artists, particularly musicians. A couple stood out, and I've always been saddened by this one. I don't know why. I did not listen to him all that much. Tim Buckley was a very famous but more folk style singer. I think back in the 70s. He died of a drug mixture, drug overdose in his 20s, I believe. And then his son, Jeff Buckley, I think most famous for his version of Alleluia. I believe it was
Mm-hmm.
him. And that album that he did, I think it was called Grace, was really well received. I think he was getting to the point of, closing in on important, if not superstar status, or, for that type of music. And he died in such a strange way. Like they were, I think in New Jersey, they were there for a concert, and for whatever reason, he jumped into, I think, a river, and he was swimming, and he got caught up in the wake of a tugboat, and he drowned. And they did toxicology. There was no drugs, no alcohol. It was just exuberance, I guess. And I mean, that was both of those, especially when you have father son who die at such a young age with so much talent. I mean, it's like the kid from The Crow, and
Brandon Lee. Yeah.
yeah, and his dad too also died. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about, just I was never much of a Pantera fan, even though I did listen to heavy rock. I mean, I listened to them and had a stage where I was listening more to them. But when the guitarist for Pantera went on to form his own band, Damage Plan, and he was playing in a small club in Columbus, Ohio, I think, is named Dimebag Darrell. So it's Daryl Abbott, and that crazed fan jumped up on the stage and shot him. I mean,
Yeah.
and then a stagehand was shot trying to unarm him, and one of the fans was shot and killed. And then finally, a police officer came in and killed the assailant. And the thing about it is, I go like you, I don't know how big the Rialto is, but I go to so many small clubs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the beauties is that the artists can come down. Like I've seen the Subdueds 3 or 4 times in small clubs where I think they now call it four on the floor. Like they hop off the stage, no instruments, they go out there and they sing a cappella, and
Hmm.
it's awesome. It's usually the best part of the show. And just to think that you'd be sitting there at some small club and it can be as random as some, heavy metal or some acoustic show. And to think that something like that would happen, I just remember when that story came out, it was just scary.
Yeah.
So
And I got to tell you, I never knew exactly how Jeff Buckley died.
when I first think I realized that they were father and son, I think also sometimes mixed up. I assumed that Jeff
Uh,
Buckley died from a drug overdose too.
yeah. And that's probably why I thought that. You're right, because the father did, and I thought originally Jeff Buckley just died from being in New Jersey.
All right.
So
You ready for a question?
I was wondering if we had any questions from any listeners.
We do have a question. Hold on, let me pull it up. There we go. We got a question from Jonathan writing in from Murder Island, Nova Scotia. Fits perfectly with our topic.
It does. It does. What did he want to know?
Jonathan from Murder Island, Nova Scotia wants to know what is the best tribute song written for an artist or bandmate who has died? Do you want to go first?
I will go first. Thank you. I struggled with this one a little bit, and
I
I
can tell.
came. I'm struggling even telling you about it. I'm so touched. It is very recent,
This
and
is a tough one.
I've talked about both these performers a couple times because they are square in both our wheelhouse as far as their musical output is concerned. But Steve Earle put together and produced a tribute album to his son, Justin Townes Earle, who died, I think, in 2020. He did die from a drug overdose. He had frequent and difficult problems with drug abuse over his life. He'd been in rehab a number of times. I may at this point be a bigger fan of Justin Townes Earle's music than I am of Steve Earle's music. Although Steve Earle will always have a place in my heart, if only because that was, I think you discovered him, but we found him almost together and listened to him constantly back when we were roommates. But he did this wonderful tribute album to his son, which was basically an album of covers of Justin Townes Earle music. And he did a nice job. JT's were better, but it was really touching. And of course, seemed very fitting for a singer, songwriter, musician to do that for his son. The final song on that album, which was called JT, is Last Words. And it's the only original song Steve Earle put on the album, and it is his tribute to his son. And it is a tearjerker. I did not pull up the lyrics, but he basically, he says, if the song is to be believed, the last conversation he had with his son was over the phone, and the last words his son said to him were "I love you," and the last words he said to Justin were "I love you." And you just hope that's true, I believe it probably is. But if it isn't, it's just one of the most beautiful, kind of heart wrenching songs that I've heard Steve Earle do in 30 years, and it's just amazing.
And I want to go back and look now because I was thinking when you said that we discovered, I think we both discovered him. One of his early albums, there's a song at the end that is to his really young son at that time. So it's basically his kid. And I have to go back and look at it and see, because I think why you said you hope that it's true is that Justin Townes Earle and Steve Earle had a rather strained relationship after JT started recording and was an adult. And it seems to be a pattern, unfortunately, with Steve Earle. Some of the bands that I like the most went on his label, and they all seem to break up right after recording an album with him.
Yeah, yeah, he does seem to be a tough man to live with. He's also been married and divorced like 4 or 5 times. And I know
Yeah.
that Justin wrote a song, I think it might have been on his the last album he released, called Mama's Eyes. And it has a little, it's not a dig at his dad as much as an acknowledgement of what you just said, which is that
Yeah.
there's history there. And
Yeah.
he's on his mom's side, no matter what. That's another beautiful song. Steve Earle's tribute to him is really a beautiful, beautiful song.
Yeah. And I say that with the foreknowledge that I had almost picked a Steve Earle song for this too, because I think he's really, really good at writing these types of tribute songs. He's a fantastic songwriter.
Yep.
I realized I haven't listened to him in probably 10 years ish, which is unfortunate because he can do some really great stuff. But I almost went with Fort Worth Blues, which was his tribute to Townes Van Zandt. And I don't think if you just listened to the song, you would necessarily know it. But it's just a beautifully written, poetic lines throughout it. And if you know that it is a tribute to Townes Van Zandt, it's truly a beautiful song. But I decided to go with a different one, and I was not wanting to use them because I've already used them for a playlist pick this year. But since I'm answering Jonathan and since he lives on Murder Island, I feel like I owe him the best possible song I can pick. So I went with a very sad song by the Drive By Truckers, Two Daughters and a Beautiful Wife. The song itself is beautiful. The story behind it is tragic. It's a story about a not overly famous musician who was in a couple local bands. I think it was in Pennsylvania. The larger point is that they lived in this small, oh, I'm sorry, they lived in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Just, I remembered that now. Apparently, him and his wife, very trusting. It was over at Christmas. They were going to have a Christmas party the next day. And one of his bandmates came to the house and noticed smoke. They went down into the basement and a fire had been set, and they found these four bodies, and they tried to take them outside and they realized that they were already dead. But basically, they, I guess, suffered from a home invasion. They left the front door open, wide open. I thought people might be coming over. Someone must have just come into the house, ransacked the house, and then killed the husband, the wife, and their two daughters. And Drive-By Truckers knew of this artist and wrote what I think is easily one of the most beautiful, touching, painful tribute songs. It's about going up to heaven and not quite knowing why you're there. And it just talks about, I mean, the story itself, if you just go and read it, songwriter.com, the magazine, has a story about it. It's heart-wrenching. And the song itself, once you know that context, I think it makes it even that much more beautiful. And it's not maudlin or anything like that. It's just a really beautiful, appropriate tribute song by a great band to a father and his wife and his two daughters.
Yeah, I didn't know that he was a musician. I didn't realize that part of it. And you're right. That does, I don't know that it doesn't make it any more or less beautiful. That's a fantastic song. That really is a good one.
And I'm sorry, so I'll avoid the post facto, but it was Richmond, Virginia. I know that his name is Brian Harvey. He was 49 when he passed. He was in a post-punk Americana duo called House of Freaks. And it was his duo partner who came to the house the next day and unfortunately discovered that scene.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
So if we haven't depressed the audience enough, how else are we going to do that? What's
You know
coming up?
what? Let's recommend some songs from dead guys. What do you think?
I don't know why the hell I'm laughing. Okay, fine.
This,
Let's do it.
let's just do it. We're already in now. What are we going to do? So we're going to make a recommendation from then, which we define in this podcast as anything that was created prior to the year 2000. We'll also give you a recommendation for now, which will be 2000 and after. But let's start with then. What is your recommendation for then?
My recommendation from then is not their most well-known song, but it seems fittingly depressing for this topic. It's a song by the Smithereens called Cut Flowers. It's from their incredibly named album 11,
Mhm.
as in this one goes to 11 from 1989. Chose it because Pat Denizio, the lead singer of the Smithereens. I know Tom and I saw them in concert. I think I may have seen them at the end of his life. Afterwards, the lead singer Pat Denizio had fallen on ill health. You can see from some photos that he was a little bit larger than he was. He's always just such a thin and
Hmm.
energetic man. And apparently he had suffered some falls and had injured himself, and was not able to move a lot, and spiraled downward from there, and died several years ago. And the band was well past its prime. I probably wasn't listening to him much, if at all, but I remember the news of his death really bummed me out because they were one of those bands that I just loved so much because they were different than other things that I listened to. Like I had the Americana and the punk. This was that power pop, not a trio, but a power pop band that just could belt out a 2.5 minute song better than anyone with just power guitar chords. His voice was a little monotone. And if you've heard Tom and I talk, at least me talk, I always love to envision that I can actually sing. So that monotone voice works for me. I could actually possibly have pulled that off. And I went back and forth. A Girl Like You, I wanted to choose because it embodies them so much. And
Yeah, it's such a
uh,
great song.
just the way it starts out with the guitar songs and then his voice. But they'd also have some, powerfully sad songs. And one of those was Cut Flowers. I'm not even going to try to sing it, but you go through the beginning where he talks about, cut flowers sent to a girl with sentimental ways. Cut flowers meant more to her on ordinary days. And then a couple more refrains. And it is one of their slower songs. And then you sort of get to the punchline of the song, which is cut flowers pressed between the pages of a book she gave. I go to her and say, I'm sorry. Then I put cut flowers on her grave. So it's just another of those beautifully heart wrenching, and I've used that word twice. I probably haven't used that word twice in 20 years, but I'll probably use it a third time since this is about dead artists. Nice topic, Tom.
Yeah, yeah. You know I didn't recommend this.
I know I
No,
did.
you know it wasn't me. Everybody, the audience knows it wasn't me. I love the Smithereens. They were such a great live band. They were so much fun to watch.
And that's the thing is they were fun. It's like
Yeah,
um
exactly.
that is the theme that ties it all together. Like I think I've said this before, but you and I saw Drive By Truckers too, and I think at one point you and I both looked at each other and like, damn, Patterson Hood just looks happy. Like he
Yeah,
was he just is
exactly.
smiling and having a blast up there, and it's infectious. It makes you want to listen to them even more. So, what do you
So
got for a
I have
recommendation from then?
I have a question for you before
Oh,
you
you got a
keep going.
question.
What's your rating for Cut Flowers?
Oh, I got to do that. I'm going to go with 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
I can't, a Girl Like You would be 5 out of 5, although it doesn't really fit the theme here. It is one of their good songs. It's not one of their best songs, but it seemed appropriate for this. Maybe I should start paying attention to the format of this
Well,
podcast.
why start? Why change now? Uh, my recommendation for then is the band I already talked about, Material Issue, who also, oddly, power pop, kind of different than what you and I both generally listen to. I think Smithereens and Material Issue are similar in a lot of ways in terms of the energy they play with. They tend to stick to the 2.5 minute pop songs. I just didn't know which one to pick. I picked the band because of what I already talked about, the fact that unfortunately their driving force committed suicide. But the song Renee Remains the Same is one of my favorite songs from Material Issue. I don't necessarily think the song fits the theme, but obviously the singer does. It's from the album International Pop Overthrow, which came out in 1991, and they just rock it. It's just really good. I'm giving it 4 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream. I saw them play it live. It's just a fantastic, fantastic song.
Oh, sure. Rub it in. Give the egg burritos right away. Like it's a natural part of the process.
It is helpful to me if you go first because it gives me a little bit longer time to remember to rate this stuff.
Fine. That will then mean that for our recommendations for now, so anything 2000 or later, I will go first, and I'm giving it 5 out of 5 egg burritos with sour
Well, tell
cream.
us who it is first.
Well, it's out there. You didn't say the order. You just said I had to. And that way I don't forget. And
There
I'll
you
say it
go.
again at the end. So this is an artist that I've also mentioned previously. This is Split Lip Rayfield. In its own way, this is equally morbid, but it's one of my favorite revenge songs in the history of music. It's a song from the 2004 Should Have Seen It Coming album, and it's Promise Not to Tell. And it is brutal and fun. I hate to say it, but it is a kid, and this isn't fun. Don't get me wrong at all. It was sung from the perspective of a kid who was abused, sexually abused by a predator, and he's remembering and telling the guy, you've made me promise never not to tell." And he now has, at an older age, that predator in captivity, and he is going to torture him to death. And uh, you don't know this song?
I I can't remember it. I may have blanked it out.
I wouldn't blame you, but I don't know why. Hold on. I wasn't going to, but I'm gonna read some lines from this song.
It's been a while since I've listened to these guys, so I think I'm gonna have to go back and re-listen. While you're looking,
Yeah.
I'm
Why
gonna
don't
tell I'm
why
gonna
don't you
tell our
entertain
audience.
people?
I'll try to do my best. We've talked about these recommendations. They will show up on our website, by the way, thirdsonginpodcast.com, along with our rankings and along with recommendations we've been making over the length of this season and prior seasons. So please check out the website.
There it is. The fifth song on this fantastic. Oh, you motherfuckers. They're missing the lyrics.
All right, let's just
All that
assume
time.
there were
But he's
lyrics.
like, I can paraphrase, and then in the post facto,
There
I'll
you
listen
go.
to the song. But basically, he's like, don't cry because there's nothing you're gonna do. This is my time to get back at you. And this, I happen to rhyme that, but that's not the lyrics. Um,
That was good though.
yeah, it was good. But it's an upbeat, catchy song behind a, as I said before, brutal and awesome revenge song. And none of that should have happened, but if someone gets what's coming to them, I usually like that song.
All right. I'm
And
gonna
it's chosen because of Kirk Renstrom's death. And
right.
again, 5 out of 5 stars, one of my favorites of all time.
All right. Well, my recommendation for now is from 2003. It's an entire album. It's the album "The Wind" by Warren Zevon,
Yeah.
and he wrote this entire album, all the songs on this album. He wrote after he found out a diagnosis that was he knew was going to lead to his imminent death. So he saw death around the corner and decided the best way he could face it and deal with it was to put together an absolutely beautiful album of music, both for himself, I think, for his family, and of course for his fans. The album includes one of my all-time favorite songs, which is "Keep Me in Your Heart." And we talked a little bit about that song way back, I want to
Mhm.
say in season two, when with our very first guest, Liz Armstrong. She picked that song performed by a different group, and I can't remember the name of the group right now. But it made me think of "Keep Me in Your Heart," and I've got that on a million different playlists because I really really love it. But the entire album is very cohesive. It's very much a meditation on life and life just before death when you know it's coming. I'm rating it 4 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream. As I said, the specific song "Keep Me in Your Heart" would have been a 5 out of 5, but I think our listeners should listen to that whole song because it is absolutely beautiful and haunting it's in an uplifting way. It's really a joyful album, but it is hard to listen to when you realize
Mhm.
what he was going through as he was writing the songs and performing them.
Yeah, and I mean, didn't he write a book as well?
I believe
Or
he did.
someone, yeah, it's like
Yeah,
I'll sleep when I'm dead or something like that.
exactly. And he was doing the rounds. He was doing the late night talk shows, and
Yeah,
he was doing all the stuff you do to promote your album. But he was also talking about his diagnosis, and it's crazy. I mean, and I think really brave. It's a different version of the musician going off of his chemo because
right.
he wants to go down playing, and
Yeah,
that's definitely what Warren Zevon's message was here: was to do what you love and do
yep.
it until the end. It's really,
And incredibly inspirational.
yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
that's a great choice.
Thanks.
And you didn't fumble around for the lyrics like I did. However, you do know that we're going to hear it from Liz because you couldn't remember what her recommendation was.
Yeah, I can't. Can you?
No,
It was like a duo. It was
I'm
two.
not saying I'm not saying I'm any better than you. I'm just saying
She's
you're
gonna
going to
go
hear
after
it
me.
because you couldn't remember.
Yeah, I'm the one who brought it up. You're right.
She's used to disappointment from me.
And if you want to know why, go back to season two. Our next segment is relatively new, and it's called staff recommendations.
Just around the corner from you.
All right, let me start off because mine is so out of character for me. So I went with a just released album by an artist who drew me in first because she sang a duet with a band called Flatland Cavalry, and the song they sang is another one of my favorites. It's either a time, I think it's called "A Time When We Worked Out." It's a really pretty song about a recently married couple, and they're already remembering the good old days. She's got a beautiful voice, but she's far more than just a sidekick. And she's recently released a new album that sounds really intriguing. I was able to listen to 4 or 5 of the songs off of it. It's called Roadrunner with an exclamation point. And what's cool is she talked about, I read an interview, when she was a kid, her parents would every year they'd take them to a production of Oklahoma. And this is her own riff on Oklahoma. So she actually has some, was it Rogers and Hammerstein music scattered throughout. She has a lot of original tunes. It also involves murder, which is, I didn't mean to tie it into the theme, but it's definitely when I say riff, it's not a straight ripoff of Oklahoma. It's her own interpretation, and she's her voice varies. I sometimes have a hard time with, and I've been open about this. I don't listen to a ton of female singers. At times, her voice hits a high pitch that is not always super attractive to my listening, but other times the power of her voice comes through. But her songwriting's outstanding. The energy of this album is great, and apparently she's going to turn it into a visual piece as well with videos. So we used the word in a previous episode that an album was, I said theatrical, and Tom said cinematograph, whatever the fuck you said.
I said cinematic.
Cinematic. I knew, I wrote it down. Why don't I
It's right
read?
there. I see it.
Why
It's
don't I
right on
read?
the outline.
She seems to be doing a lot with this album. Just came out. I would encourage our listeners to give it a listen.
Cool. Cool. Well, the thing about staff recommendations is that they are supposed to be stuff that is either coming out or recently out. It is we as far as our own rules are concerned, we kind of decided that it didn't have to be connected to the theme of the episode or anything like that. But oddly enough, it seems like we both kind of ended up connecting our staff recommendations to the theme of the episode. I'm recommending, and this is also cheating because it's not really brand new, but as I was doing some research trying to figure out what artists to discuss in our Dead Artist episode, I couldn't help but think about Prince, who died not so long ago and who is greatly missed by anyone who loves music. And as I was looking through, I found out that the movie Purple Rain is being re-released as a 40th anniversary release in at the end of July of this year. So I believe July 29th, 2024, they're going to release it. I assume it'll be, you'll be able to find it on iTunes, and I imagine they'll release it on, Blu-ray and 4K for the 7 of us who still buy those things.
Mhm.
But Purple Rain is an interesting movie. It's not the best movie in the world, but it has one of the most beautiful women in the world because Apollonia was in that movie and she was really nice to look at. But the soundtrack to that movie is phenomenal. And as I was going through things, I thought, you know what, that'll make a good staff recommendation. It's old slash new, but I'm really going to like. I want to see what the extras are on the 40th anniversary release. I want to see. I think there are a lot of interviews and other information and short, films. You know how they put all those little shorts in with DVD extras, or they used to anyway. So I'm gonna. I don't know that I'll pick it up in its physical form, but I'm gonna find it on iTunes and I'm gonna rewatch it. So that's my staff recommendation for this week is Purple Rain, 40th anniversary re-release, which comes out at the end of July.
It was a perfect MTV era movie.
Yes.
It was the song scenes were the best part of the movie. Everything in between was
Yeah,
just get me to the next song.
exactly. It's just a collection of music videos is all it is. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's got Prince, it's got Apollonia, it's got Sheila E., it's got Morris Day and the Time. It's
Yes.
just, it's so good. I am really looking forward to rewatching it.
Yeah, that should be good. Okay. That will take us to our playlist recommendations. And every week Tom and I each pick a song, generally, relatively unknown or not super popular. It definitely should tie into the theme of the episode, at least tangentially. Look at that. I said that word appropriately.
Very nice.
And then we keep the playlist going for each season. We're now on season 3. And this will be our 8th set of songs on the playlist. And those playlists can be found on Spotify, Apple Music, or iTunes, YouTube Music, and the big one. What am I
Amazon.
missing? Amazon. Oh, I thought I said Amazon.
Maybe you did.
Jeez.
Maybe
All right, let's
you
try
did.
again. YouTube,
YouTube,
Spotify,
Spotify.
Amazon,
Mhm.
Apple.
That's it. Those 4.
What do I always say when I get it right? Boom. Done.
Boom.
God, how hard is this? We've only done this. This is the 28th time. You would think I could figure this shit out.
We'll just keep trying, man.
If you guys could
what else
see
do
the
we have
look
to
on
do?
Tom's face, it would all be worth it.
We really,
I've been
I don't-
driving Tom crazy like this for fucking 38 years. Something
38
like that.
years. Yeah. Yeah. There are some times where I think it should be a video podcast, but not very often.
No, it's okay.
So we have playlist picks. Who's going first?
I'll go first because I need someone to pick this episode up after me. This one's gonna just boom right down into the depressing, melancholic, sad ass shit. So this one definitely fits in. It's not a musical artist who the song is addressed to, but it is a fantastically sad song. It's Noah Gunderson's Robin Williams, and I'm choosing the version from 2020. The original version came out in 2019. I'm choosing the acoustic version, which to me is just a little bit more powerful. In reality, this is all about death. And in the end, it's also sort of about the death of the music industry. But Robin Williams, I hope I get this expression right, is sort of the trope for this because he uses the word trope in it. Doesn't really mention Robin Williams until, if I said Robin Williams, I'm going to be really annoyed. Robin Williams until the third refrain of the song. But when it hits, it's a tough one. And this part goes, well, nothing lasts forever and every other trope. I guess it just depends how much DMT is smoked. But when I think of Robin Williams at the end of his rope, it makes no difference what you're making. The Reaper makes the final joke. It's just tough. I won't read any more beyond that. And it's really not that morbid. It's just, like I said, I think overall it's about the music industry and what he's been struggling through, and ends up using Robin Williams as a powerful metaphor for all that. And it's a tough song to listen to. I think it's well worth a listen. And I apologize in advance if it's too depressing, but it's Noah Gunderson can write one hell of a sad song, and this is one of his saddest, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go. I said
Yeah.
someone's got to pick us up, man. Let's go.
Well, I'll do my best, but the song I picked was written by a dead guy, so I don't know.
Well, it wasn't. So it wasn't written by a dead guy. It was
Well,
written by a guy.
he was alive at the time. Yes,
It's
yes.
just-
that
let's
would be
be-
impressive.
That would be. It probably wouldn't be that depressing because
No.
we'd be like, "Holy shit,
Yeah.
that dead guy." So,
How did he write this song? The song
oh,
is
you did Justin Townes Earl, dude.
I know. This does seem to be an episode that kind of circles around itself a little bit. But
Yeah.
as I said before, I really, really like Justin Townes Earl, and I miss him, and I really feel like he had so much more to give us in terms of just wonderful songwriting. He put out, I think this is his very first studio release was called Yuma from 2007. And the song is Yuma, which definitely follows the theme of death. And in fact, kind of ironically and very sadly, discusses the suicide of the protagonist in the song. And, not to outdo you on reading depressing lyrics or discussing depressing music, the last 4 lines of the song are, "He was tired of living life, looking for love. A weary heart just needs a little touch. And is it too much to ask?" he cried as he stepped into the wind. He turned his back on the world and he fell back to earth again.
Hmm.
And the beginning of the song basically describes a guy standing on the ledge of a building. And I can remember the first time I listened to the song, it's a slow song with very clear acoustics, I guess. I mean, you can hear every word. It's easy to follow along. Sometimes some songs aren't so easy to follow along and listen to the first time. And you got to the last line, which says he turned his back on the world and he fell back to earth again. And I remember my jaw dropping. Like literally, I opened my mouth. And I was like, "What?" And I had to turn around and listen to the song again to make sure I heard it right. And it is a very sad song about, unfortunately, a sad character, but written and performed, played by somebody who had his own sad life itself. And it's so unfortunate that we don't have him to listen to anymore. So I don't think I brought us up, man. I don't think I brought us back. I think I made it worse.
I gotta go get a tissue.
I
You're killing me.
really made it worse. But
I think you did. But now you just built upon the momentum of sadness that I created. Because apparently
this is a tough one.
But you know what? That's the same reaction I had when I first heard that line about when Robin Williams reaches the end of his rope. Because to me, it almost seems like it's a little off. Like you just don't expect it. And he's not making fun of death at all. I think it's actually a very touching tribute to Robin Williams. It's just that the mechanics of death sometimes, like falling and hitting and coming back to earth, even if you refer to them in somewhat poetic ways, is rough. And I mean, I don't know. We didn't talk too much before this episode. We don't usually plan too far ahead, other than the script and literally. But I mean, I knew going in that this one was gonna be a little bit of a downer. It's that combination. We talked about the balance where you can find uplifting and sad, and find something positive out of the sad. And hopefully we've done that with some of our recommendations.
Yeah. And I promise that next episode, we're going to find something that's a little more positive as a topic.
Are you sure you can make that promise?
Well, I'm sure that's what the topic will be, is something more positive. I don't know what the hell you're going to do with it. So I guess I can't really make that promise. There's no telling.
I guess that's fair.
Okay.
I take it as a challenge.
We have an email address, thirdsongin@gmail.com. If you send us an email, we will read it. We're hoping for comments, questions. If you have some suggestions with respect to this episode and its topic, or any episode, please email us. We'll get back to you, and we would appreciate the feedback.
If you'd like more information on the podcast or material related to the podcast, check out our website, thirdsonginpodcast.com. We have direct links to all the playlists that we've discussed already. There's an episode spotlight where we choose a short video that we think exemplifies what we just discussed. Usually try to make it humorous. Every Thursday, Tom or I will release a blog. You can find that directly from the homepage, and I'll take you to all the blogs we've published so far this year. In addition, there's a list of all the recommendations for this season and from season 2. We're working on pulling together an extra page where you can see the staff recommendations, or the recommendations of new material that we've added to the last couple episodes.
We'd really like you to follow us wherever you listen to your podcast. Review our podcast if you can, whether it's on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Spotify. Please rate us. Give us all your stars, or I'm coming to get them. Look for the playlist. As Chris said, the playlists are titled Third Song In, Season 1, Season 2, Season 3. They are all on Spotify. They're all on Apple Music, iTunes, Amazon Music, YouTube Music. We also have a Facebook page, which is a good way to communicate with us. You can send us messages through Facebook. And again, any feedback you can give us to make the podcast better, or to comment on what we've had to talk about would be fantastic.
You've been listening to Third Song In with Tom and Chris. We appreciate you listening.
I need to look at something.
Okay.
I apologize, but I want to get it
So
right.
now's when you choose to look at porn? Seriously.
Well, it just give me, it won't take long.